Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Mountain View Wisman School District Board of Trustees regular meeting held on October 6th, 2022. And at 6:06, I would like to call the meeting to order. Will everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is roll call.
Devin Conley,
Chris Chang.
Helen Wheeler,
Laura Berman,
Laura Blakely. Let the record reflect that all 5 trustees are present. The next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. May I have a motion?
so moved. Second,
Okay. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
aye.
Aye. Trustee Conley, look like
Did we need to take public comment on the agenda?
we don't always, but if there's anyone on the phone who wanted to comment on the agenda, will you please raise your hand in Zoom or press *9 if you are participating by phone? Okay, I don't see any comments from the public, so we will let the approved motion stand. The next item 2 on the agenda, is the opportunity for members of the public to address the board concerning items on the closed session agenda. If there are any members of the public wishing to speak to us this evening on one of the items or any of the items on the closed session agenda, please raise your hand in Zoom or press *9 if you are participating by phone. Seeing none, at 6:08, the meeting will be adjourned to closed session and we'll return when we're done. Thank you, everyone. Good evening, everyone. The board has returned from closed session back into open session at 7:31. And to report out on closed session, item 3A, the conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D1, Gallup Paving Inc. versus Mountain View Wisdom School District, case number 20 CV 3659977. No action was taken. With respect to item 3B, negotiations, item 1, conference with real property negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8 regarding 777 West Middlefield in Mountain View. The board discussed the price in terms of payment related to the funding agreement for our employee housing project. The board voted unanimously to approve that agreement and directed the superintendent and district staff to execute that agreement. Then with regard to item B2, conference with real property negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8, the property is APN 197-32-001. The address on the agenda was incorrect. The correct address of the property is 330 Eunice in Mountain View, California. And the report out is that the board discussed the price in terms of payment related to the restrictive covenant for the Cooper site. The board voted unanimously to approve that document and directed the superintendent and staff to record that document with the Santa Clara County Recorder. Okay, thank you everyone for listening through that. We are now reconvening open session. I apologize, I said that earlier at 7:31. It's at 7:33. We are reconvening open session. Oh no, I did this backwards. I'm sorry. We just did that and I just gave a closed session report. Moving on to item 5, the consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be approved in one motion. If discussion is required, items may be removed for separate consideration. Were there any members of the public wishing to speak on any of the items listed in the consent agenda? If so, please raise your hand in Zoom or press *9. Seeing none, may I have a motion, trustees? Trustee Chang?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second. Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, on a motion made by trustee Chang and seconded by trustee Wheeler, the consent agenda was approved unanimously. We're now moving along to item 6, communications. A is employee organizations. Are there any members of employee organizations here this evening that wish to address the board? If so, please raise your hand in Zoom or press *9 if you're participating by phone. Okay, seeing none, we'll move to district committees. Are there any members of district committees here this evening that wish to address the board? If so, please raise your hand in Zoom. Okay, seeing none, item 6C is superintendent's comments. Oh, pardon me.
No, it's fine. I'm not on Zoom. It's
Trustee
hard to-
Conley, I know.
So the District Equity Committee met earlier this week for its second meeting of this school year. And the committee last year worked on an equity statement for the district and framework. And this year is starting to tackle the idea of how do we look at an equity scorecard? What metrics are we looking at to evaluate whether or not we're meeting equity goals? And so that work kicked off. I want to thank all the people who returned to that committee this year. And we're still looking to add more people, I think. So if anyone's interested, community member, staff member, parent, the equity committee is really open to all. And it's a wonderful group of people who are working really hard.
Thank you, Trustee Conley. And I'd just like to thank all of the members of all of our committees. It takes a village, and we do appreciate your support. So in addition to the Equity Committee, whom we do appreciate. All right, Dr. Rudolph, Superintendent comments.
All right. Good evening. So just want to do a couple of quick updates. The first one, as I reported last time, and I just enabled them on the big screen over here. We do have closed caption available on our Zoom. We do not have it yet for Spanish. It requires a lot more work, and so we're working on that. But in the event that you need Spanish interpretation, it is available for this meeting. If you're using a Mac or PC, click on the globe at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And if you're on iPhone or Android, it's in the options menu. Hay interpretación en español disponible para este región. Si está usado una Mac o una PC, haga clic en el globo en la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom. Si está en iPhone or Android, está en el menu de opciones. So October is Safety Month. We have a couple of activities that we're going to be doing across all of our sites. We will be doing our Great Shake activity. You're going to get all of this in the email, but we will be doing a Great Shake activity to practice earthquake safety on the 27th. So we'll be talking about that. We also are preparing for Run, Hide, and Defend. And so we will, at the middle schools, we actually do the Run, Hide, Defend training. At the elementary schools, we show an age-appropriate video for those. We do practice the Run, Hide, Defend at the middle school with MVPD, so they are familiar with our facilities. Obviously, we're constantly changing our facilities because of construction. It's always important, or because MVPD has some turnover, so it's always important to make sure they're familiar so we can improve our ability to get to kids in the event of an emergency. And I just want to remind everybody, this actually was a request of students after, I want to say, the Parkland shooting that occurred. And a couple of years ago when we had the shooting at Six Flags, as well as the shooting at the Gilroy Garlic Festival, several of our students happened to be there and knew exactly what to do as a result of the training, right? So it definitely has an impact to help kids and save lives. And so we're excited to get to practice these things to get our kids with those. And we also do fire drills also, right, as part of what we do. What the board just approved earlier today, which I'll be talking about tomorrow, on November 3rd, the board just approved 2 agreements that were also approved in City Council, which gets us 2 steps closer to opening our teacher housing unit at 777 Middlefield. So it's teacher and staff housing. We have another project also underway, which is another 12 units, but this is 144 units that will be built. It was paid for by bond proceeds, which means that the rents are really going to be affordable. They have to pay the land lease. But outside of that, we're super excited. I heard last week that, and I wasn't over there, but the concrete has been poured, and this week they're delivering the wood. So chances are, by the time we do the groundbreaking in November, 2 board meetings from now, we will see part of the wood frame actually up and going. So it's right across from Safeway, right on Shoreline. You see our signs along with the other contractor signs. It's a great project. It's really big. Right now, if you drive by, the biggest thing you're going to see is a parking garage, which is just basically a big hole. But we're super excited to be working with MVO as well as the city to make this happen. Just want to remind people that October 13th and 14th, students do not have school. Teachers have an in-service on the 13th, and then there's a holiday for all employees on the 14th. So just Eli reminded me of that this morning, that he had 2 days off, and so I figured I should probably let everybody else know, because normally I'm not aware of when the holidays are coming. So we got to thank Eli for doing that. And of course, tomorrow we have our community check-in, which will be touching base on a lot of different issues around this. A lot of focus will be on the safety, because October Safety Month, we'll be talking about those. That's all I have.
Thank you, Dr. Rudolph. Is the district closed on those days, or is it just there's
On the 14th, the district is closed, but on the 13th, we're open.
Teacher service day. Okay.
It's a teacher service day. So the school sites will be focused on the teacher in service. It's actually a day that we're doing a lot of safety training across all of our sites, but the district office will also be open in the event that there's a need or emergency.
Thank you. Okay, let's move along to community comments, item 7 on the agenda. This is the time reserved for community members to address the board on items that are not on the agenda. The board and administration welcome this opportunity to listen. However, in compliance with the Brown Act, the board is not permitted to take action on non-agenda items. If there are any members of the public here this evening wishing to speak on an item that is not on the board agenda, will you please raise your hand in Zoom? I don't think anybody has dialed in, so raise your hand in Zoom. And I see one hand. We'll give it a moment to see if there are others. Okay, we have one member of the public wishing to speak on an item not on the board. And that is Amber Kerr, and you will have 3 minutes to address the board. And when you see the timer, you can unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Stand in the hallway.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
I'm sorry about the delay. I lost my connection at an awkward moment. My name is Amber Kerr, and I'm the parent of Irene Manson in 5th and Miles Manson in 1st grade at Stevenson, a wonderful school. I spoke to you all a month ago regarding your vaccination policy for parent volunteers. I was unable to complete my COVID vaccinations due to a serious adverse reaction, and my doctor doesn't recommend that I seek any additional shots due to the nature of the reaction. I was surprised to find myself disallowed from volunteering at any MVWSD campus, and I was hoping that those rules might be updated soon, because the pandemic has shifted in nature from when those rules were first initiated. So I corresponded with Dr. Rudolph several times over email. He expressed that MVWSD was following county guidelines and that essentially your hands are tied, you're not able to change the vaccine mandate. I mentioned that there are some other schools in Santa Clara County that do allow unvaccinated parent volunteers, but I think the conversation kind of petered out at that point. So I decided to try to figure out from the County Department of Public Health what their guidelines were at this point, and try to use that as some impetus to maybe get these rules updated at MVWSD. So I emailed this as part of my public comment, but I also wanted to briefly read aloud the highlight that I got from an email from Dr. Sarah Cody's office at the Santa Clara County Department of Public Health. So let's see, this is from an admin named Tiffany Buslag, and she wrote on September 22nd, the County of Santa Clara Public Health Department does not have a public health order that requires vaccination for parent volunteers, and we do not dictate rules for school policies. I would ask the school district to cite which health order they are referencing. As of September 12th, Dr. Cody has rescinded all prior health orders except the requirement to wear face coverings in higher risk settings. None of the prior health orders required vaccination for parent volunteers or school staff. Now, I know at MVWSD, there's a bit of an additional wrinkle, which is that the teachers union voted for mandatory vaccination, meaning that having a testing infrastructure was therefore unnecessary, and so it wasn't in place for volunteers. However, as of September 17th, the state health order has said that vaccine verification and testing is no longer required. So testing is not, as according to the state, required for unvaccinated school workers anymore. I hope that this updated rule may make it possible for you to reconsider MVWSD's policy on mandatory vaccinations for parent volunteers. Thanks a lot for listening. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Kerr. Okay.
President Blakely,
Yes.
can I just ask Dr. Rudolph, my understanding, because we've seen a lot of emails, is that it's Cal OSHA that is really in charge of the workplace requirements still. And what we've seen at the state and kind of county health departments is a little bit performative because it hasn't stepped over to Cal OSHA and contract negotiations. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thanks for clarifying that. Okay, we will now move to item 8, review and action. And item A under 8 is resolution 01-100622, local assignment option, speech language. And I believe I just lost my, Richard is speaking on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much and good evening. As we do each year, I am bringing a resolution to you tonight. This local assignment option authorizes the 6 contractors listed, all of whom are licensed by the Speech and Language Audiology Board and hold master's degrees in communications disorders to provide speech and language services to our students.
Thank you, Ms. Richard. Trustees, were there any clarifying questions? Okay, if there are any members of the public wishing to speak on this item, will you please raise your hand in Zoom? Okay, seeing none. Any comments or a motion?
I make a motion that the Board of Trustees adopt Board Resolution 01-100622, local assignment option for speech and language as presented.
Second. All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Thank you. On a motion made by Trustee Conley, seconded by Trustee Berman, the resolution 01-100622, local assignment option for speech and language passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Richard. Okay, and now moving along to item 8B, Mountain View Wisman School District Expanded Learning Opportunities Program Plan for the 2022-2023 school year. And I believe it is Director Chang that will be addressing us this evening. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, board and public. Tonight, staff is sharing the required state plan for MVWSD's Expanded Learning Opportunities Program for approval. This plan was shared at the September 8th meeting of the Board of Trustees. And so tonight, we are recommending that the board approves the MVWSD Expanded Learning Opportunities Program Plan 22-23 as presented.
Thank you, Director Chang. I know we had an opportunity to discuss this at our last meeting, but were there any clarifying questions, trustees? If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on this item, will you please raise your hand in Zoom? Okay, seeing none. Any comments, trustees, or may I have a motion to approve the ELAP plan?
I make a motion that the Board of Trustees approve the MVWSD Expanded Learning Opportunities Program Plan for 2022 to 2023 as presented.
Second. Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, on a motion made by Trustee Conley, seconded by Trustee Berman, the ELAP program plan for the coming school year, for the current school year, was approved unanimously. Okay, we will now move along to item 9, review and discussion. And the first item under review and discussion is A, equitable access to choice schools. And I believe Director Henderson will be presenting this evening. Do we have Director Henderson on Zoom?
Yep. Ms. Hausman, we need you to co-host 2 people, as well as Ms. Jimbo, who does next. And
good evening, trustees.
Good evening.
And thanks, Shelley. Thank you, Dr. Doff. All right, so I'm going to just share my screen and jump right in. Okay, and I anticipate that we're going to fly through this evening because it's really just a scope of work. And it's also the first review of the board policy, which the bulk of the decisions were made at the end of last year. So it should be pretty routine. Obviously, we like to base all of our work in the strategic plan, especially goal areas 3 and 5, inclusive and supportive culture and equitable distribution of resources that support student success. So like I was saying, our goals and objectives today are to give a first review of the updated board policy that's based on the decisions that we made at the end of last year, and to provide any feedback so that ultimately we can approve the revision to the policy language on 10/20. This 10/20 date is revised on this slide deck. I had made a mistake and wrote 10/22. So if anybody following that closely, that's the only revision that I've made. The other things that I want to talk about are a scope of work, and this is really plans to tackle the other 3 items. So one is recruitment and enrollment at our choice schools in Mount View Isthman, access to transportation for students at choice programs, and then creating and maintaining inclusive climates for parents and students at both our choice program schools. So of course, I've included the policy language, and this is primarily just to review. So the policy language includes terms like socioeconomically disadvantaged students and relatively socioeconomically disadvantaged students. This is not changed. This is explicated in the policy as well. And so we've already seen this. So socioeconomically disadvantaged students can qualify in 3 areas, one considering family income and household size, and the other is parent education level. And they would receive, of course, extra weight. And relatively SED students, which again provides that larger net, would be based solely on family income. It would not consider household size, and it would be less than half of Mountain View's median family income. So you did make the decision at the end of last year to do a modified tiered lottery with weighted options. So it's a tiered lottery and a weighted lottery. The weights wouldn't go into effect until tier 9. So all tiers 1 through 8 would relatively remain the same. All siblings are prioritized for admission. For all remaining seats, those weights would be applied in terms of socioeconomic and relative socioeconomic disadvantage. So we were able to keep the parts of the tiered policy that we feel were applicable and relevant and helpful. And then we were able to, of course, infuse that weighted lottery option. So the next steps to communicate this policy to the public and to make sure it's transparent and accessible is we're in the midst actually currently of recording, editing, and translating an informational video to help explain the weighted lottery policy in accessible language. So once that's created and finalized, we would obviously publish and disseminate that video along with any other updated information on our website. We would also want to embed all of that new information, policy language, video links into all previously printed or published enrollment materials so that everything was updated and current. For transparency, and because the policies that we're looking to adopt are flexible, meaning that they depend on the demographics and the applicant pool for each year, there would be a yearly report to the Board of Trustees that outlines and explains how the weights for that particular year are calculated for special populations, specifically socioeconomic and relative socioeconomic disadvantage. That would occur in October of each year annually. That's made possible because we're using the data from the year before. I want to celebrate the fact that we're able to leverage current practices. So we're actually running the lottery through PowerSchool. So there's not going to be any more kind of manual calculations and things like that. So hopefully this will be able to be a really sustainable process going forward. It's also wonderful that we have a unified enrollment platform. So families don't have an additional hurdle of filling in another application if they want to go to a choice program. It's all on the same application. So we're in meetings currently and receiving guidance and expertise from both our partners at PowerSchool and Kate Fletcher, who helped us design the weighted lottery. So that's the policy piece. And obviously also included with this particular presentation was the exact language of the policy for your review. And I'll be asking, of course, for your feedback at the end of the presentation. But along with policy, there were 3 other areas that we really needed to address. One was recruitment, the other was transportation, and the third is climate. Those are, of course, complex and complicated in their own right. So what I've done here is proposed a scope of work that will take us from now all the way to the end of the school year. And I'll detail each one. So for policy, what we're looking at is review and approval by the end of October. So at the October 20th board meeting, pending any changes that we make or that are proposed this evening, dissemination of information and updates, and the video explanation as well. So looking at recruitment and how we market our choice programs, the scope of work really requires the development and deployment of a needs assessment so that we can understand current practices, so that we can get kind of a handle on, what's currently happening at the district, so that we can, of course, leverage already existing components, not duplicate efforts, and make it as streamlined and consistent as possible. We would need to review the results of the needs assessment, and then, of course, outline a plan of action. Open enrollment begins in January, and in February, enrollment lottery for choice programs would be carried out. So just keeping those different timelines in mind. Obviously, we'd be able to put into place a few things for this particular enrollment cycle, but we'd be looking at transforming, of course, the greater cycle for years to come, so it's a sustainable practice. And same thing with transportation, just dipping, my toe into the transportation department. We've got a lot of amazing, hardworking people in that department, but it became very obvious that if we were to think about expanding our scope of services to include transporting children at choice programs, we would need to do the same thing. We would need to understand exactly what our capabilities are right now in terms of our efficiency and our efficacy of routes, et cetera. So my recommendation would be obviously to approve an outside vendor to come in, provide transportation analysis with a lens for expansion, so we can understand our current practices and then our capabilities. And then in December and January, that outside vendor would come and do a data collection and provide a report to both the Board of Trustees and the district, along with recommendations of how to escalate our services, because that's what our eyes on currently. And then the recommendations for adjustments, of course, would be reported to the Board of Trustees, and that would give us a lot more information. And then finally, maintaining an inclusive climate at both of our choice schools is important, not only to our choice schools, but to all schools. But again, it's really important that we examine current practices so that we can come up with a really clear and targeted practice, not that we're throwing all of this stuff, right, that's not necessarily needed, but that needs assessment helps us target our interventions, if any are necessary. We would need to, again, review the results of the needs assessment and review a plan of action with the Board of Trustees and their feedback, and then work with the choice program stakeholder groups to implement any enhancements to their particular program to make sure that families already there and new families would feel welcome in those environments. So the kind of the bite-sized chunk for this evening is to provide feedback on policy and what revisions, if any, need to be made. And then, of course, I'd be coming back to the board several more times before the end of the year to provide updates on the scope of work that I've presented here and any updates that we receive from outside vendors. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Henderson. Trustees, any clarifying questions on this item? Trustee Conley.
Thank you, President Blakely. Thank you, Director Henderson. That was a quick but thorough presentation. So I'm a little, my understanding is we've already voted on the lottery process. So any changes would require a supermajority of the board to vote again to change the process. So I'm a little unclear on the feedback tonight.
This is the actual policy. So the policy is to match the vote.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So
That makes
what
more
we
sense.
said was, because we were uncertain where the board was going to land, that we weren't able to have the policy drafted. So this policy is what we're going to update in the board laws, and then we'll put the administrative regulation with it. And so it now reflects what the board's vote was.
And that is just slides 6 and 7 that are that policy, because we didn't receive a separate policy document in the agenda packet.
I thought there was one. If there wasn't, that was my mistake.
It's not attached to the cover sheet right now.
Okay, you were supposed to receive the draft policy with it. So this was referring to that. So
I see.
what we can do is we can bring it back so that you have a first reading. We'll email it to you. We'll get it to you later on tonight or tomorrow. But essentially the policy is just a reflection of the direction that the board gave. And so we'll just re-agendize it for the next meeting if there's some feedback you have, and then we'll move the second reading to this third
Thank you.
November. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm just looking at I always look at the massive PDF, but even on the individual cover sheet, it's not. Yeah. Somehow or another fell through the cracks. Life happens. But
My
it sounds-
apologies.
we can still have the discussion this evening. So on what you presented. Were there any other clarifying questions? Trustee Chang.
Thank you. For the online packet for this meeting, can we upload just a PDF addendum with just the policy language as a separate file to the website?
We can add it as a side attachment, but it'll be included in the next board packet, which goes out next week also.
Thank you. Any other questions, clarifying questions, trustees? Okay, if there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the equitable access to choice schools item, will you please raise your hand in Zoom? Okay, I am not seeing any hands raised. So trustees, any additional comments on this item? Trustee Conley, you look like you're about to press your button.
I'm really excited that we're undertaking this work and that it's not just about a policy or changing the lottery, but it's looking at all of these other aspects of what decreases barriers for our target families to actually join both of our choice programs. It is a large chunk of work, and I hope we can complete it thoroughly, but I do think even once we get through this initial review process and maybe we make decisions about transportation and recruitment, I think this is going to be years of work ahead of us to really ensure that all of the students in our community feel welcome and included at our choice programs. And I appreciate the work. I know there's an equity committee at Stevenson that's been really excited about this and helpful. And parents at Mistral are very focused on the same process. So I appreciate the work of the parents and teachers and staff who have been also driving this.
I concur with what you just said, Trustee Conley, and this has, been a long time coming, and it has been, generations of parents have worked on this, but I'm really glad we're putting a district focus on the recruitment and transportation and climate. And I like the plan that was laid out. Trustee Chang.
Thank you. I echo the appreciation and gratitude to everyone for the success on diversifying our choice programs. We're doing this presentation. I was thinking back to a CSBA speaker that many of us heard 2 years ago, Leslie Odom, who spoke. And Leslie Odom is an actor and singer, starred Aaron Burr in Hamilton, and he was speaking at the California School Board Association. I think everyone was there. So then, and he said, his call to action to school boards were about the beauty of diversity, and that whatever work we do, we can make it as diverse as possible. It just makes everything more powerful and magical. And so I look forward to the hard work as we have succeeded with this in our choice programs. So looking at how can we ensure the maximum diversity in our neighborhood schools, because our neighborhood schools, as we succeed with our choice programs reflecting the beautiful diversity of Mountain View, we still have some hard work ahead to see that our zip codes, and not zip codes, but our neighborhood boundaries aren't creating unintentionally segregated environments. So I think there's a hard work ahead for that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments, trustees? Okay, I don't think we need a motion on this item, so thank you, everyone.
Just want to make sure that you're comfortable with us going out for a contractor for transportation to look not only how to make it more efficient, but also to sort of be able to help us understand how we can ramp up if that's the direction that we need to go.
Yes. All supportive. Thank you. Okay, we will move along now to item 9B, social emotional learning and mental health update. And we have Director Karen Jimbo and Coordinator Brian White speaking to us this evening. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, trustees. It's a pleasure to be here tonight to bring you an update on social emotional learning and mental health. Let me get my screen. Okay. Here we go. All right. So I also am excited to have Coordinator White with us co-presenting. And as with all our work, we are aligned with our strategic plan 2027. And for tonight's update, goal 2 is the focus of our updates. As well, our work is guided by the outcomes of the Health and Wellness Survey results that provided us our priorities. SEL and mental health is aligned with general student engagement, and a common measurement that we use for this is attendance. As you can see with our 2021-22 attendance represented in blue and the 22-23 attendance represented in orange. So far this year, we're seeing higher rates of attendance for August and September, which is great news. So as we begin to engage in our SEL and mental health work this year, we remain optimistic with the steps we're taking to begin our strategic plan initiatives. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Coordinator White to share our focus areas for the school year.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, it's been a pleasure to join Mountain View Wisman as our district's coordinator of health and wellness. I'm going to provide an overview of our SEL focus areas for 22-23. First up, I'd like to discuss our whole child approach to SEL, which is necessary to ensure an integrated, consistent approach to social emotional learning as stated in goal area 2. The whole child approach provides supportive classroom and campus environments. It focuses on building developmental student peer and student adult relationships while building knowledge, skills, and mindsets. And as we have the opportunity to examine long-term data, we will learn as a district how our efforts in social emotional learning impact other student outcomes, including school discipline. As we look more closely at SEL, social emotional learning itself, we know, is a broad and sometimes overwhelming topic. So this year we're focusing on 2 competencies, self-awareness and self-management, which reflects the results of the Health and Wellness Survey from last year and the work of last year's SEL committee. And since this work is new for everyone, we'll start with these 2 competency areas. Looking closer at those focus areas, you'll notice that each focus is divided into separate student and community statements. So the student statement reflects what we want our students to learn for self-awareness. It's to identify the emotions they are experiencing and understand how one's thoughts and emotions influence their choices and behaviors. And because there are so many explicit skills embedded in learning self-awareness, a collective effort by our school community to model this competency is what supports our students developing these skills. The "we can" in the community statement reflects our efforts as adults to model these skills for our students. And then the student and community statements for our second focus area, self-management, takes a similar approach. When we make a whole school effort to develop and demonstrate our own self-management and self-monitoring, it helps our students to do the same. Like all learning, direct instruction and supportive teacher-student relationships are essential for student growth. So all elementary students receive direct SEL instruction from clinicians with the Community Health Awareness Council, or CHAC. Students in grades 2 and 4 participate in the Back Together Arts program that helps children develop the self-awareness and self-management skills that are essential when kids transition into a new school year. And kids in transitional kindergarten, and grades 1, 3, and 5 receive direct competency-based instruction. And I just want to note that teachers are required to be in the classroom during instruction and that they're provided with extension activities that support the push-in lessons. The Zone to Grow program is an important tool we will be using to support student-teacher relationships and monitor students' social emotional growth. And in identifying a program that met our needs, we included input from last year's SEL committee and consulted with site and district administrators, also considered factors like alignment with SEL competencies and our compatibility with our existing technology infrastructure. And that led us to opt for a trial of Zone to Grow with 5th grade students, which is being expanded to all elementary students this year. It's a comprehensive student goal setting and reflection program, and it provides a wealth of SEL functions. We're really focusing on a small piece of the program, the weekly student check-in, reflection, and feedback. Another element of Sown to Grow is that it includes scaffolded teacher support for responding to student reflections, and it also increases our ability to proactively address student emotional health and learning needs, and it also alerts us to concerning student feedback that may require more immediate support. So last spring, we opened the trial to fifth grade teachers at all of our elementary schools, and given the time of year, we were grateful that the fifth grade teams at Vargas, Landals, and Stevenson were able to participate in an 8-week trial of the emotional check-in tool. And additionally, Castro trialed the SEL survey portion of the platform, and that is a survey that's administered once or twice per year to survey student perceptions of their own SEL skills. And as you can see, the trial included teacher and student feedback, and the teacher feedback that we received includes the comments that you see here. For example, Sown to Grow holds space for students to reflect and experience the moment. Another teacher noted that the program allowed me to examine the big pictures of emotions students were experiencing. And while we were only trying out the check-in tool, a teacher who trialed the optional lessons also noted that the lessons were short and to the point, generated a lot of discussion, and allows for larger conversations and supplementing our own material. And then the student feedback that we received included the following comments. I like it because I can share my feelings. We got to share how our week was going with someone we trust. Now I can see how my emotions changed throughout the 10 weeks, and it's nice to write down your feelings instead of ignoring them. And it helped that we were sharing with our teacher at the end of the year. We wouldn't have felt comfortable with sharing with someone we didn't know at the start of the school year, and multiple student comments reflected that sentiment. So looking at the data collected from the trial, we've decided to move forward with the emotional check-in tool at SEL survey this year. All schools will have access to these tools. Elementary will move forward implementing the check-in tool for all grade levels. And then for middle school, the trial, it'll be a trial year for the check-in tool this year. These tools support our focus areas by allowing teachers and schools to monitor weekly student and emotional functioning and monitor the overall emotional levels of their students in the MTSS process. And so the check-in tool, what is the check-in tool? It's a brief reflection tool where students respond on a visual scale to a question, like, how are you feeling today? And that can include written feedback and an opportunity to answer a narrative question like, what strategy are you using that's helping? And by using child and youth-friendly emojis, the check-in tool is accessible for all our learners. And then after students participate in a check-in, teachers have the opportunity to provide feedback to student responses. And SEL is a new and sometimes uncomfortable topic for teachers. So the program offers suggested responses based on the student feedback. And that scaffolding of suggested phrases offers teachers a straightforward way to respond to student feedback and builds teachers' fluency with social emotional learning language. So our aim here is to support these focus areas by strengthening student-teacher engagement and develop a better understanding of the student school experience, while of course providing us school-wide data that informs our practice. So, and with that, I will hand it back to Director Jimbo to discuss mental health supports.
Thank you. So as we look at our district-wide mental health supports, we continue our partnership with the Community Health Awareness Council, or CHAC, to bring school-based counseling to TK through 8th grade. CHAC provides clinical associates and clinical interns supervised by licensed therapists to our schools. Students are referred through a central point of contact at each one of our schools. Of course, these referrals can be prompted by a parent or a teacher concern. All of our schools are provided with a minimum of 4 days per week of counseling, with some schools assigned more coverage based on need. And school-based counseling can be individual or in dyads, which is 2 students to a counselor, to each CHAC counselor. We also continue our partnership this year with Santa Clara County Behavioral Health, who provides access to Pacific Clinics, who is formerly known to us as Uplift. So Pacific Clinics provides individual and family counseling and behavioral supports to our school link services schools. And that includes Castro, Crittenden, Graham, Montaloma, and Therakoff. As well, when one of these schools has a class-wide concern in the area of bullying, aggression, maybe high stress, or friendship or social skills challenges, Pacific Clinics clinicians can provide skill streaming push-in lessons. So when we have student supports such as these on a campus, we want to be able to monitor referrals and student progress with the interventions. This is where a coordination of services team, or COST, plays a role in our multi-tiered system of support. So COST is a process within the MTSS that brings personnel together to identify student needs, match the need with an appropriate service or support, and monitor student progress when receiving the service. What COST will eventually provide for us as a district is a mechanism for reducing or eliminating wait lists for services, or while ensuring student needs are met. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Coordinator White to share a bit more about our exploration of COST at Castro, where we monitor and manage many services and service providers, including our wellness center supports.
Right. So with sites working with multiple staff and agencies to provide mental health support, we're looking at COST as a process to provide students access to timely and effective tiered intervention. COST is an adaptive and flexible structure that includes a universal referral, use of student data, and goal setting. And while the team typically includes staff like the site administrators, school psychologists, SCEF, ARIS, it might also include nurses, clinicians, or other staff that may be able to provide specialized intervention. So we're currently trialing this process at Castro, and our goal this year is to establish COST at Castro and then have other schools eventually identify their COST members for each site. And as we've noted, providing timely and effective mental health support requires coordinating structures at the site level. COST can address that need, but we do want to say it's going to require professional development, training, and coaching for it to take root. And as these are new processes for staff, we aim to provide the needed space for growth.
So in our world of professional development this year, we are making steps to ensure that we are building capacity in our personnel so that our work can sustain. So in August 2022, we did provide certificated professional development around safe and supportive learning environments. And I apologize for the redundancy on the slide here, but essentially we expanded the work we began in the 21-22 school year with our SEL practices professional development to this year, guiding educators through an opportunity for developing their learning environments that provide predictability, consistency for students, and promote belonging and strong adult-student relationships. As well, in August, professional development was provided to the BTB staff, BTB staff on similar topics that built skills in empathy, creating a predictable environment, and suicide prevention. As well, suicide prevention training is provided to our educators through the Keenan platform. We have provided Zone to Grow training to our administrators in September, and we're offering supportive office hours as well subsequent to that, so to help them through the implementation process. And our Zone to Grow teacher training will be provided ongoing through this month as well up through November 18th, where we are looking for our initial implementation. So as we move into the installation of all of these elements, we do need to keep in mind that this work is happening in the midst of all of our other strategic plan initiatives. So we definitely need to take time to learn from this experience. We will examine teacher and principal feedback on the impacts on the scheduling or to the scheduling and instructional time as we use these elements in the classroom. And we'll continue to examine student data to assess student and staff needs. So as we are looking at providing mental health supports continuing on our classroom or on our school campuses, we do know that it does require the coordination at each school site level to ensure that the intervention addresses a student need and that it's monitored. So we're going to continue our work on cost development and so that we can address this in the future. So we're scaling up the implementation of cost. It does require professional development, training and coaching for all personnel involved. And this process is new to the educational personnel. This is something that is typically in the clinical world looked at as like clinical team meetings. And bringing it to the school site helps us to ensure that our students are making progress So we do need to give space for growth in this learning process. So what are our next steps looking ahead to this next year? We began disseminating the SEL competencies at the August PD with our educators. We will continue at every opportunity to disseminate this information. As an example of this, our parent university on October 26th, we will be sharing with parents the competencies and some information on developmentally appropriate stages of social emotional skills in our two focus areas, self-awareness and self-management, and a few tips and tricks for supporting their children in this development. So just a little shameless plug for our parent university session on October 26th, 5:30 to 7 p.m. You can find the information on our website. Additionally, we are currently supporting principals in the initial stages of implementing our social emotional check-in tool. And our SEL committee schedule will be announced very soon, where teachers and administrators will collaborate on aligning our SEL competencies with instructional standards and continue to develop our SEL guidebook. And as we said, we'll continue cost development and training. And with that, I turn it back to our trustees.
Thank you very much, both of you. I have some questions, and I see that my colleagues, several of my colleagues do as well. So Trustee Coleman, do you want to start? And then Trustee Chang, you can go next.
All right, thank you. So this is such important and necessary work. Director Jimbo and Coordinator White, we really appreciate you being here with us tonight to tell us about all of the programming going on. One piece that I'm really curious about is our teachers and our staff. And, you know, it's hard to hold space for students and help them through social emotional learning programs when you may be stressed personally or dealing with the same trauma that our students have had coming out of the pandemic. So recently, some of the trustees and I heard a presentation by SCC-SBA. There was a panel of superintendents from other districts. And in Sunnyvale, they're using a program called Acknowledge Alliance. And one of the focuses is on teacher resiliency. And they have mental health professionals who work with teacher support groups and administrative or leadership support groups. They're opt-in, they're not required of staff, but they've been very, very popular across the district. There may be things we're already doing that I didn't quite understand in the presentation. So I'd love to hear more about how we are supporting our teacher and staff's own mental health and resiliency so they can better support our children.
Yeah, so I think part of the effort of bringing CHAC into the classroom with the lessons and the modeling is somewhat of a scale up of education of learning for the teacher. So it's a very easily accessible environment for the teachers, low demand and exposed to the information and the learning in the classroom alongside the students. In terms of something like you're describing, like a support group or something that might be something that's a little more targeted to individual needs, that is not necessarily part of our plan for SEL and mental health. But again, I am always listening to what you're bringing to us because I think it's important information to consider.
May I jump in here too and just say that we do also provide information to our staff about mental health supports that are available throughout the county and our district, and do try to make sure we reach out to our staff, you know, anytime they are struggling or we hear of some needs of that in that way.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Bickjordan. Thank you, Director Jinbo. I think lowering the barriers to accessing support is important. We're seeing it with our students. I also think it's important for our adults. We've all heard about the lack of capacity in our current healthcare system for mental health supports, but there may be, you know, teachers. I'm hearing from parents about teachers who sound stressed in the classroom because, to a certain extent, the way we see some of the distress in children comes out in behavior issues within classrooms. So disruption or other types of things going on. And some teachers are struggling with that a little bit. And from what I've been hearing, it doesn't sound like it's just about a classroom management skill. It's about making sure that our teachers are whole too. So I am concerned about that because I keep hearing about it from parents.
It's definitely something we can look into. I'll touch base with the superintendent from Sunnyvale and just to get an understanding of what it is.
Trustee Chang.
Thank you for that presentation and welcome, Coordinator White to the district. The first question I have is the Sow to Grow, which I believe is the Oakland startup, and choosing them to be piloted. Were other programs also piloted, or so what was the selection process for that curriculum?
Yeah, so with input from our stakeholders in the SEL committee, our administrators, and we didn't opt, given the time frame, we didn't opt to pilot multiple programs because in the elimination or the selection process, what we wanted to make sure is that as we look ahead to not only consider the needs that we have going on right now, but look ahead at how, one, the data is going to help us, two, ease of use for our boots on the ground, our integration with the technology. We wanted to make sure that there was also, we didn't want a duplication of effort. So some of the programs that we looked at were also had like academic components that we didn't really necessarily need, or there were data components that we were already included in what we have going on in the district already. So with moving through that process of making sure that it was something that was going to be value added, the information was going to be useful for us at the universal level, and it was also something that we could consider for long term. This seemed like the best fit given how it can expand. It can expand to not just the emotional check-in, but also in once the instruction happens, the teachers can do a check-in with the student about a particular lesson on the emotional side, like how did that feel? Where do you have questions as the student is exposed to the new material or new lessons. So it felt very integrated with what we do here in Mountain View Wisman about instruction and crafting instruction unique to our classrooms. It felt like the best fit given all the information and context that we're working within.
Thank you. Two quick questions.
Dr. Rudolph has something he'd like to say.
We also wanted to make sure that with the state adopting a framework and not being sure what type of curriculum, we needed something that was sort of low entry point, for lack of a better word, that we could start doing something to sort of adhere or honor the strategic plan, but at the same time, understand that we're not really sure where the state's going to go with it, which could drive us to a larger curriculum adoption. And so it's also just trying to understand how we can invest without this, or start an investment without truly investing. So in the event that once we get the framework out, which should be soon, then that will sort of drive us looking at all possible options. But in the interim, we felt uncomfortable with allowing this gap to continue on and not do anything.
Thank you. Two quick questions. Mountain View Voice, I think 2 weeks ago, ran a story about challenges for regional and local families, including Mountain View, to access therapy for their children. And I'm wondering, the services that we provide on site, are any of them in the form where if with the referral, a child can receive repeated services on school site for what typically a family would have to pay out of pocket for a therapist? Or is the services provided on site different from what a therapist would provide families with means? I'm trying to sense of what services are provided on site before it's referred out. Thank you.
Yeah, so the on-site services, everything is school school-based counseling. So it is generally focused on a need that surfaces that is affecting a student's access to their education or their ability to access instruction. That being said, I think your question there's a lot in your question, and one of the pieces of that is therapeutic need and the degree to which the intensity of the need for the student. So I think when you talk about services that a family might access either out of pocket or via insurance, generally those tend to be the higher need, diagnostically a higher need. And I'm gonna jump off just a little bit on this because I think where we see the road going with mental health access is with the governor's mental health plan. What we're going to see in a few years, I would say 3 to 5 years, is expansion of Medi-Cal prevention and early intervention in schools or through the county office. So right now, what we have is school-based counseling. It is very, I would say, light compared to therapy. Therapy is a trained therapist, like psychotherapist, is something that you might access through insurance or paid services. So it's the first step to that. Should a family need more services, a referral can be made via our chat clinicians or even our Pacific clinics. Pacific Clinics also has a stepped up service in terms of prevention and early intervention, and then also intensive services beyond that. So a family could potentially get referred to higher level of service.
Thank you. This last one, even quicker, I think, is that between the Pacific Clinic or Uplift, the school sites that have that, is there overlap with also the school sites that have CHAC, and do they provide different things if they're on the same school site?
Yeah, good question. So they offer similar services. I would say if you were to put it in a tiered, what's more intensive, Pacific Clinics and CHAC kind of serve a similar population in terms of need at a lower intensity, but also Pacific Clinics adds another layer of more intensive service should there be a clinical need for the child. Clinical meaning diagnostic.
I'm going to jump in here with a question that kind of relates to that. We talk about our school link services, schools, and those are the ones that have Pacific clinics, and that's Castro, Crittenden, Graham, Montaloma, and Therakoff. How did those get designated as school link services, and what does that really mean? I mean, I've heard that for years, and I've never really asked the question. I know we have Beyond the Bell, for example,
sure,
certain schools, and that hasn't changed. Is it similar?
Sure, no. So school link services is actually, it's access granted through Santa Clara County Behavioral Health. It is actually a grant system from the state. And so based on based on identified need, the Santa Clara County Behavioral Health, they've got a collaborative, an executive collaborative that then determines schools that they can offer this service to. And typically it's based on socioeconomic need. These schools were identified as having highest need in terms of students at one point. The contract continues with them. I'm not necessarily involved in the selection process. It comes from the county behavioral health department.
Originally started from zip codes.
And it can't be changed, just like the Beyond the Bell thing is, like once it's in, it's grandfathered in.
The grant is managed outside of us, so we're just the recipient of it. So schooling services is funded through a grant from the county, and the county commissioners are the ones who do it. They're the ones who make the determination about which schools qualify and which schools don't.
And if it's zip codes, then shouldn't Mistral be in the mix?
Mistral, when it started, Mistral wasn't a school.
Right.
So
Castro would have been.
Yeah, and I'm going to add, every year that I've been here, I've asked for them to expand it to other schools. They take our request into consideration, but it's how they decide to disseminate the grant.
Okay, well, thank you for answering that question. I have more, but we'll turn it over to Trustee Berman first.
That really was my question.
Oh, I was going to say, who do we write to?
I wonder as well if they won't let us add it. I mean, if they were to sort of reevaluate the schools and the zip codes and thinking about it, If we're only allowed for, 5, 6 schools, whatever the number is, I wonder if they would change the priority for our district, because that was my same question, wondering, if Castro is in that mix, where is Mistral?
So it's been over, when I've sat in the meetings, it's really just about continuing the grant. And so they've just continued it as it is, as opposed to making wholesale changes to it. So it hasn't been a reevaluation or determination about this school or that school. It's just, these are the schools, these are the districts that qualify, and they've been that way for quite some time. And their request has always been to go back and continue the services with just a small adjustment based off of whatever the cost of living or has been. So it's never been a full wholesale assessment of it. And I think part of that has been fear that if they try to reassess it, that they would have to reassess it for the whole county, and that it would sort of move out of our area, out of the scope of what they could provide.
So we should just be grateful for what we've got. We've got it at ours.
I think we continue to try and find ways to get it adjusted. I mean, I think the reality just is that, they are just continuing this particular service, and there's several grants that are like this, right? So there's like the A or B, right? And so we're in there with Oak Grove and a couple other districts. And it just happens to be that was when that grant was created. It has nothing to do with the reality now.
That's helpful. Did you have another question, Trustee Berman?
Well, maybe it's more of a comment, so I'll save it.
Okay, well, I have one other question, which is about cost. I was trying to wrap my head around what that program was. Is it kind of like an IEP team, but for mental health services? Or, I mean, you said it involves administrators, SCEFs, ARIS, nurses, various people at the schools. Like, is this on top of their regular jobs, or how? I'm still just trying to really understand how that works and how we can expand it to all the schools, because it sounds like it's a pretty intensive program, maybe a really good one. But is this like one more thing that we're doing, or do we need extra staff to run it?
Yeah, Director Jumbo, do you want me to address that? Okay. So one of the things that COST does is it takes a lot of the work that people are already doing and it organizes it into a systemic way. And that was one of the things that last year that really kind of came out of some of those initial COST meetings at Castro, was realizing that, everybody, there was a lot of duplication of effort, right? So COST organizes that. And it's not like an IEP in the sense that, an IEP is really focusing on one individual student, and that's what the meeting is about. With COST, it's much more of kind of like a rounds kind of meeting, where you're going through different student needs, quickly triaging them, looking at data, and then identifying interventions that work for that student, and then following up on other students that have been receiving interventions. And in the tiered framework of like an MTSS kind of a system, it's about identifying where kids need to be on that tier and when kids move up and down. And so it is a lot of work, and it's a shift for a lot of schools, but once it gets rolling, it really kind of prevents a lot of that duplication of effort.
Okay, thank you. I may still need more explanation in the coming meetings, but it sounds like a great program. I just was trying to figure out how that would work. Trustee Conley?
I'll be brief. The MTSS link to COST was very helpful, though, so thank you. So I'm curious about, last year with CHAC, we had high demand for the CHAC services at our school sites. And then there are certain points in the school year where we're just full up on demand and there aren't slots available. So I would love to, you might not have updates yet because services have just started up in the last few weeks, but to get updates as a board about our CHAC caseloads and our CHAC wait list. And so how much need are we seeing, and whether or not that need is being met within our existing contracts?
Certainly, thank you. I do meet with CHAC on a regular basis, Coordinator White and I do. So we'll add that to our agenda with them, and we will do the best we can to keep you updated as frequently as possible on the numbers.
Thank you.
Okay, I think this is now the time to open, unless anybody else had another question. Okay, opening it up to comments from members of the public. If you have any points you would like to address on this item, will you please raise your hand in Zoom? Okay, I am not seeing any. So trustees, comments, trustee Chang.
Thank you. And thank you for this item. I think the whole board agrees how important social emotional wellness is. And the timing is actually really good. This week, starting October 2nd, is Mental Illness Awareness Week. And when we think of like social emotional health, where it's like, proactive, like helping kids learn how to emotionally regulate, when there's illness, that part actually still doesn't get talked about enough. And when it's Mental Illness Awareness Week, that includes common illnesses defined by them as anxiety. 1 in 5 people, including children, experience anxiety. That is mental illness. So is trauma, obsessive compulsive disorder, being bipolar. These are this week, which is why this is really good that we're talking about this week. Those are things that a lot of times people, adults, children, staff members, parents feel like they need to hide. And so I just want to bring up that, this is a week for us to see them. And I think having this item does that. Trustee Wheeler and I were at the yesterday's Social Emotional Health Wellness Committee. And again, welcoming Coordinator Brian White to be leading that and leading SEL in our district. I'm very impressed with him and just immensely impressed with the parents who volunteered. There's always been a lot of work behind the scenes by people who've been on the committee. Wow, this year there's Trustee Wheeler could probably say more, but there was I think over four pediatricians on the committee, over 3 people with a public health background. I mean, this is a powerhouse group under the Coordinator White. Excited to see what they do. Just the last 2 things, just want to echo what Trustee Connolly said about the need for adults. One thing that did come up yesterday, yesterday was an informational meeting, but when the teachers who are on the meeting said why they came, many of them were saying they came because they're worried about their colleagues, they're worried about themselves, they're worried about, and we hear that from our teachers. And there are organizations like Breathe for Change and the one you mentioned as well that work on adult resiliency and adult health. And if the teachers aren't, if their bucket's leaking, has taken a Project Cornerstone thing, if you can't fill a bucket if your bucket's leaking. So I really echo what Trustee Connolly said. And just last is that I would encourage us to, as we look at SEL, if we adopt a permanent program, I would welcome it go through a competitive curriculum process where we test out more than one. I had the same feelings when we did computer science, this idea that SEL is as important as math or reading or writing, and there's a reason why the state requires us to go through a competitive bid for those. It's to have a rigorous program, and we deserve a rigorous program in SEL. And I was so excited when Director Jimbo was saying that about the state expanding services to go beyond academic-based mental health issues, because it is a true concern that if you have means, you can pay for a therapist, but we all know that trauma and anxiety is not just something that's tied to income, perhaps quite the opposite, and that it's those children, when they, just as we at school look at nutrition and help those kids be healthy, we don't just look at them having healthy school lunches and worry that don't teach them to have healthy food at home. Same with mental health. Like, we want them to have academic wellness when it comes to SEL, but I really welcome this idea that the governor and the state and us will provide, ideally therapist-like services for families that need it at school. Thank you for this presentation.
Thank you, Trustee Chang. And I will just point out, as I believe Director Jimbo said earlier, we can't, do a formal adoption when there is not a curriculum that's been approved. So I appreciate the effort that went into selecting this one. And just based on what you've told us, it sounds like the feedback was very good. both from students and staff. And so I'm excited. I'm really glad we didn't just wait around for the state to adopt a curriculum. Because like what was with math, we were waiting 12 years. No, science, we were waiting 12 years or something. So thank you for doing this. Trustee Berman.
Well, I think you can clearly see that we're a board that is really excited about all the SEL work and the mental health supports that we have in our school district. I appreciate so much the models that we are setting our teachers up in the classroom, because as you mentioned, some of those comments that get populated in those surveys are modeling for teachers some of the language they can use and how to respond to students. So it feels like this is an opportunity for them to see some really strong examples of how we can work with our students, how to respond to them. And I know that our competencies come from the CASEL competencies. And in the CASEL, it says that it's adults and students learning and growing alongside one another. So I think as much as we can continue to emphasize and support our teachers, all of our staff across our school districts, that all the staff that interacts with students, our parents, that this is really a community endeavor, that we all need to sort of learn this framework, because SEL isn't something that we're supposed to teach in isolation. We need to understand the competencies and the language that comes from it, but it really is part of developing healthy human beings, the future of our society and our community and of our workforce. So it will take a village for all of us to support our children. So I think, I appreciate that we got started on the work. This is a long-term process, a long-term thing. And I think, we can continue to look to these examples that we're setting up. I think another one is, that our parents really appreciate, respect, and sort of hold on to is Project Cornerstone, which is also, based on these competencies, and, have that familiar language for parents to use at home. And they offer so many great parent workshops. We've had them at Parent University. They had another program called Los Dichos. That's for our Spanish-speaking families. I'm not sure if we use that program, but it's also really phenomenal. So I think, as much as we can continue to involve the adults in our community and let them know that they have a very integral role in our SEL growth and learning, I think the better off we're going to be long-term. So thank you for all the information.
Trustee Conley.
Thank you, President Blakely. I echo my trustees' statements, where I think we're all pretty much in alignment, which is great. When we first started talking about mental health, I think it was back in 2019, those of us on the board, President Wilson at the time was really focused on student mental health and wellness. And we had a speaker who talked to us about mental health in particular and emphasized that, we're seeing these behaviors of anxiety or feelings of anxiety, depression, moving down the grade level spectrum, right? And self-harm starting as soon as middle school or even 4th or 5th grade. And the real message then was the biggest bang for your buck is parent education and parent counseling for K through 3 parents in particular, but just elementary school as well. And so I'm thrilled we have Parent University, and that, we have programs like Project Cornerstone. But to participate in Project Cornerstone, you have to be able to come during the day, which means it's limited to a certain extent and who it's available to. And so I'm interested not only in teachers, but as we move forward, the opportunities for even more training and supports for parents. I think CHEC offers some parent counseling. I'm not sure if the other program at the schooling services sites, the county program, offers parenting counseling as well. But I think the more that we can increase parent skills, the greater impact we're going to have long-term on students as well.
I actually believe our next Parent University is on mental health. Is that?
No, absolutely. Like I got the memo. Director Jimbo made the plug, but it's not just like, let's talk about it one night. It's how do we live it and can we give our parents ongoing training? And I don't know if that's like the Stevenson model where there's, monthly parent ed meetings led by teachers in their classrooms called classroom meetings, or what that model may be, but it's something else to think about as we move forward.
Trustee Berman.
Thank you, Trustee Connolly. I did want to echo just one quick thing I just wanted to put out there. Trustee Connolly already mentioned, next time we talk about it, if we can get some data around the number of students we serve and wait lists. I just wanted to echo that as just another trustee here who would really love to see our numbers and sort of think about, how we can continue to serve more students.
Okay, I think no further questions, correct? Thank you very much for your presentation and for all the work that you've done and have done and will be doing. Thank you. Okay, we are moving right along this evening to item 10 is board updates. Does anybody have any update that will not be submitted in writing? Trustee Wheeler.
So I just wanted to, I'm moving my head over looking at Trustee Conley. I remember 2 meetings ago, you were telling us that you were on your way to regional directors meeting. And we asked, oh, please give us a report when you come back. So can you give us a little information about that?
Yes, can I pull up that information? I sent out an update to CSBA delegates. Let me see if I can remember it off the top of my head. So things that the board of directors discussed and talking about CSBA, one of the biggest pushes that, and you've heard this elsewhere, that we're doing this year is expanding the voice of California trustees nationally, because CSBA is no longer a member of the NSBA, the National School Boards Association. And so there's a trip in April called Coast to Coast, which is a federal advocacy trip. It's in partnership with AXA. So, and my understanding is we're trying not to have like a whole, a superintendent and a whole board go, but to kind of get more participation from lots of districts. But I don't think we had anyone go last year. And so it's an opportunity to go to DC, and the superintendent and possibly trustees as well, or other staff, get to meet with not only our local Congress people, but the Department of Education, White House staff, and really weigh in on initiatives that impact us locally from the national level. So I would encourage our board to think about trying to send a trustee and the superintendent at least, because I think it's a really impactful place to weigh in on policies and funding that affects us.
And what I heard at the local CSBA meeting today is that the limit per school district was three people. So whether it be superintendents or assistant superintendents and trustees, so that there's a cap.
I haven't gotten the cap yet. We discussed in our meetings setting some sort of cap, but that information hadn't been given to us yet. That came from AXA. So probably by now CSBA staff, we gave direction for CSBA staff to discuss that and figure it out. And so it sounds like CSBA and AXA came up with a cap, but I haven't actually received that in official CSBA communication yet.
Well, it sounds like that would be, a very powerful meeting. And I guess if any trustees are interested, they should let Dr. Rudolph know, and we'll have to look into the budget and who else is going and schedules and all that kind of good stuff. So thank you for all the work you've done with CSBA, but also thank you for that report.
Of course. And then I can send you all an emailed report, an update with some more details about minutia. But that was kind of the biggest in terms of what directors wanted to bring back to their boards to share. That was the biggest piece, because it's limited who, just in general, how many people can attend. So if we want to send people, we need to sign up soon because the signups have opened.
Right. Thank you. Okay. Any other updates, or should we move along to item 11, items for future agendas? Were there any items for future agendas, Dr. Rudolph?
I didn't have any submitted this time.
Okay. Well, then we're at item 12, future board meeting dates. They're listed in the agenda. Our next meeting will be October 20th. We'll talk about the ESSER 2 plan update. Meetings after that, 2 in November, the 3rd and the 17th. And then December 8th will be the trustee election, and we'll have a new board. So lots coming in the months to come. Did you have something else, Dr. Rudolph?
Yep, just one thing. So the swearing is actually the 9th, which means that Trustee Wheeler, you would either have to, I mean, technically we can do a quorum if you're not here, but on the 8th would be this board, or you have to call a special meeting on the 9th to swear in. So there just needs to be a decision made about that, because Bill Lambert won't be able to join the board until December 9th. Our meeting is on December 8th. So either he gets sworn in on a special meeting, or he gets sworn in January.
Did that change? Because I tried looking up in the ed code and I thought it said the first Friday in December, and the first Friday in December is December 1st.
Second.
It's the second Friday.
Oh, maybe I was looking at an old version of the ed
There's
code.
a 2018 bill because it impacted me when I was first elected to the board.
Okay.
It's Assembly Bill 2449. And it's the second Friday in December because they want to finish all of the recounts or,
Notifications. Yep.
yeah, it's when the vote is certified.
So do we agendize this to discuss what we're going to do, or can we just discuss it because it's process? What do you recommend?
Yeah. I mean, it's essentially the question at hand is you have regularly scheduled meeting for the 8th,
right,
which is normally an organization meeting.
Okay.
But it can't include the new trustee until the day after. So you can move it, you can shift it to we can wait a week, and then you meet the guidelines. You could have the meeting as this board, swear in the next day. I mean, so there's a couple options that
we could swear in the next day and have a very short special meeting where we do the election piece.
We could also just cancel the 8th and have a regular meeting and schedule a special meeting that would cover that regular meeting content on the 9th.
Or see, I've got my light on. Typically, our meeting in December is, like after the 8th. So, the week after this week. So my suggestion to you all is that you just reschedule that meeting. Instead of having it on the 8th, you have it on the week after, either on, the following Thursday, or you could have it on some other day. It would just be a special meeting.
And when would we do the swearing in at that meeting, or?
Yeah.
So my only concern is that we're pushing up onto that 2 weeks before I'm due. My due date. So the possibility, I don't really want to discuss this here.
Maybe we should reconnoiter. Maybe we should look into it. I guess I would just say off the top of my head, I'm thinking maybe we have the regular meeting on the 8th and then a very short meeting on the 9th, just to do this work. I don't know what else is going to be on the agenda, but just do the election and swearing in at a brief meeting. Rather, I don't want to have a 3-hour meeting on a Friday. Trustee Chang.
Question for staff. Is it any less like December if we busy time for staff? Is it any less work for staff if we just do one meeting versus having people in the logistics?
I think if I was the poll staff, they would say they would prefer not to meet on a Friday for a board meeting that night. I don't know if, as long as we have a heads up. I don't think it makes as much difference in terms of planning for multiple meetings, but a longer meeting would be interesting. If the goal is to just do one, I would just say move it back a couple days, have it on a Monday or Tuesday, as opposed to trying to squeeze it in on a Friday.
Monday, Tuesday seems like a fair middle ground of close to, but one meeting and sometimes.
Should we send a survey around trying to figure that out?
How about why don't we, because I think we're getting close to probably the need to agendize this. So how about I'll just add it to the next agenda and come back with some options, and then you can weigh those. And I'll try to look at what, I know other districts do their meetings on different days, which is also different than us. So I think like MBLA probably has theirs the Tuesday after.
On Monday.
Or Monday, and then Los Altos, I think it's Tuesday or something like that. So let me see what everybody else is doing within our community, and then we go from there. We know what the city does. The city waits until January to think through one, but let me come back with some suggestions, and then that will give you the opportunity to discuss it. And in theory, right, you can allow the public to weigh in also. And there's chances, I saw him on here earlier, but chances are you could probably get a comment from Mr. Lambert about his desire to, because it would be a properly agendized one that everybody would have known would have been coming.
Thank you. At 10:02, the meeting is adjourned. 9:02, golly, I'm so out of practice. 9:02.